What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Fluffinutta back at it again with another video, and today I am going to properly do a Superman breakdown and review. And I'm talking about the 1978 Superman film starring Christopher Reeves, the very first Superman film, live action, and I believe this was one of the first widescreen films as well, which is pretty cool to think about. But yeah, I really want to get into the nitty-gritty and break this down because I really think there's a lot to talk about here, especially with the new Superman movie coming out. I've heard a lot of good reviews on it, and I'm changing my tone a little bit. I'm still a little bit on the fence because I don't know. I really am starting to enjoy the Superman character, and there was a lot to this character that I overlooked, especially when I was little. I mean, I've always liked Superman, but not in depth as I liked Batman or some of the other characters in Marvel. But with Christopher Reeves, I've always enjoyed Christopher Reeves as Superman, and I even enjoyed Henry Cavill as Superman, and just a lot of the promotion and stuff for the newer Superman movie I have not been connecting with. I've not really found myself enjoying, other than Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, because I do actually enjoy Nicholas Hoult as an actor. I think he's phenomenal. All the stuff that I've seen him in over the years, I've really enjoyed him, and see him getting into bigger and better stuff is really cool. And the fact that he's in a Superman movie, I think is fantastic. Yeah, before I get into this movie, I want you to hit that like button. Really show your support if you enjoy the movie that I'm talking about, Superman. If you enjoy Christopher Reeves as Superman, let me know down in the comments if he's your favorite Superman, which Superman's your favorite, if you've seen the newer movie. No spoilers, but let me know how you thought about that. Yeah, I'm going to try to knock out these Superman reviews. I'll probably watch Man of Steel and do a Man of Steel review before I watch the first. I'll do a first of every Superman and compare and contrast once I finally have my unique takes on all of them. I think that's a great idea, honestly. Yeah, let's go ahead and break it down. Let's do it. So, of course, the Superman movie came out in 1978. It was actually helped written by the guy that made The Godfather, which is another movie that I have yet to see, and I will probably get to eventually since I'm doing all these movie reviews. But yeah, and that's really cool to think about, that they were working on this comic book movie. I don't know who the director is, but I know that the guy that did The Godfather helped write it, so that's really cool. With this Superman movie, of course, this was made during a time where comics were prevalent, and a lot of kids were reading more comics than adults. You know, of course, you had those adults that still did that, but it was more of a kid thing. You know, I've heard that this movie is a little bit slower, and it is depending on the version you watch. I've actually watched this movie twice recently because I do own the film. I own the expanded version where you have that 3-hour long footage. But then also on HBO Max, you know, they have the normal theatrical cut, which I feel like the theatrical cut is better in length in terms of, you know, how long I actually want to sit and watch the movie. There was a lot more substance to the expanded version, so both versions are very good. I think they've all got their qualities to them and their charm, but there's also a lot of negatives too, depending on the version. But I think equally this movie is still pretty good. It's still really good to me. As a Superman fan and as a comic book movie fan, this is a great story. And as being a story guy overall, the story has to hit with me to enjoy the movie more. So let's get right into the story. So the movie starts out on Krypton, and during the credits you actually take a trip through space as the credits are flying, and the opening scene is going traveling to Krypton yourself. Like you're flying through and you're just gliding along, which is really interesting. And the guy that does the music for Star Wars, John Williams, does the composure and the orchestral music for this movie, the soundtrack. I don't know why I said it so elegant. Yeah, he does the soundtrack for the movie, and the main theme is just so iconic. It's so iconic. We get to spend a little bit of time on Krypton, and we pan in to this little globe dome thing, and Jor-El is standing in front of 3 people on a platform in front of the Kryptonian Council. And these 3 include General Zod, I believe a woman named Ursa, and I don't know the third guy's name, but I know he's like big and brawny and buff. But yeah, I didn't even know that General Zod was in this movie until I got to this. So I was like, oh shit, yeah, they actually touch on Zod. That's really cool. So they actually know their comic shit, which was very, very fascinating. And they really handled it with care too, because they set up having multiple movies. And I really think that, you know, I'm getting ahead of myself. I have a script for this, and I'm still getting ahead of myself. So yeah, he's standing in front of General Zod in front of the Kryptonian Council, and they're about to punish these 3. And he lists off the crimes that they committed, and the biggest one was that they committed an act of treason against Krypton. And the Kryptonian Council believes them to be guilty and leaves Jor-El to make his final judgment, and he declares them guilty as well. General Zod is like, hey bro, fuck you, you should join us, you know that they're wrong, and you should kneel before me because I'm going to be the guy if you let me go. And he's not going to let him go. He banishes them to the Phantom Zone. Now in the movie, the Phantom Zone is this big blocky cube that comes down, and you know, that's a little goofy, but you know, for the time, it's actually pretty cool to see them get trapped in this like little cube thing and fly off into space, banished for all eternity, to forever float off into space, not being able to stop and be trapped. It's almost like a personal hell. And one of them in the extended version actually says that it's like a personal hell. But after this, Jor-El continues his normal routine and talks amongst the council about his discovery, about how the planet is going to explode within 30 days, even sooner, if things keep projecting the way they are in the data. And the council tries to shrug them off, and they're like, nah bro, ain't finna happen. We just think that you're trying to start some panic and shit. Like, you ain't really gotta fly up on us like that, dog. Like, we don't think you being legit and shit. And he's like, aw, damn, but I am being legit. You know, whatever, bro. I guess I won't start a panic. And, you know, they're telling him, if you keep making this a big issue, we're going to have to reprimand you like we did General Zod, and you will become a criminal against Krypton. And he's like, oh, man, you're putting me in a hard position here. And then he goes back to his wife, Lara, and they decide that they can't save themselves, so they decide to send their son, Kal-El, to Earth because it has a similar atmosphere to Krypton, and he'll be able to hide there amongst them and live with them so that he won't have to be the only one left. He'll be the only Kryptonian, but he won't be alone. He'll have people looking out for him, and he can fill the pod with all these things that'll help guide him, and he'll never have to be alone, you know, Kryptonian wise, because his dad and the mom will always be with him, which is very cool. And you only know that once you watch the other movies, but spoiler alert. So they close the pod up, and the ground begins to shake because it happened day of that the planet is going to explode because the sun is getting ever so close, and it's going to cause things to get really bad on Krypton. And so he barely has enough time to close Kal's ship after giving a very beautiful dramatic dialogue. It was very, very emotional. And Marlon Brando being casted as his dad, fucking peak. That's super cool. And he sends him off to Earth as the rest of the people on Krypton prepare for their inevitable doom. And in the extended version, they really linger on this and show how dark it is, where everybody's falling into the cracks, and they actually show all the bodies fall, which I didn't think it would get that dark. It got dark fast. And for a 1978 movie, that being that dark is insanely interesting to me. But it got dark, and all the people start falling into the cracks. They're all going to die. Even more so because after Kal safely flies off towards Earth, Krypton explodes, and now they're all turned into nothing. And he flies off towards Earth, and I believe it takes him about 3 years to get to Earth. And during this time, he's aging, of course, in the pod, and his dad has used the technology from Krypton to be able to talk to his son, so he's not alone on the journey, and he's not wondering where he is. And he starts explaining multiple different things to his son, and these are things that'll get brought up later, because of course he's little, he's not going to understand them, but it's to help soothe him and help him not feel alone as he's doing this. And because he's a Kryptonian, he doesn't need to eat like humans do. He will eventually eat, of course, but he doesn't have to eat like we do, necessarily. That being said, he flies off towards Earth, and he crash lands in, I believe it's Kentucky. Let me look. I know it's Smallville. I'm just going to say Smallville. He then makes it to Earth and crash lands in a little old town called Smallville, and he is rescued from the burning pod by Martha and Jonathan Kent, who pull up as they're driving along and saw it crash land, and they run over to him, and they see that a little boy exits. And being kind people, they take him, and they're going to try to figure out what to do with him. And Martha, really wants a kid, and she offers that they could just adopt him because he's not from here, clearly. He's like, all right, that's not that big a deal. As he's doing this, the tire popped on their truck, and he's trying to get that fixed. And the truck falls and is going to land on both him and Martha. And Superman, being like 3 or 4 years old, picks up the truck so it doesn't land on them, revealing to them that he is not, obviously even more normal than what they thought. So they take care of him and look after him. Time goes by, and he grows up. He's, a teenager now. He's in high school, and he works as a assistant manager or assistant coach for the football team at Smallville High. And he is trying to talk to his high school crush, Lara Lang, I think is her name. And he's talking to her, and he's hitting it off well, but the bully, the jock, comes over and knocks all the equipment on the floor, not allowing him to go on a date with this girl. And he gets pissed, and as they leave to go listen to records and hang out and be normal teenagers, he gets pissed, picks up one of the footballs and fucking kicks it, and it just zooms and flies off into nowhere. And he quickly gets everything picked back up, and then he goes and runs home, showing off a little, trying to let off some steam. He runs faster than the train next to him, and it's really cool. And the practical effects are goofy, but there's something to the practical effects that I really like compared to CG. It's not perfect, but the fact that they tried to make it perfect was very cool, and I really appreciate that more than the sometimes the fakeness of the CGI. But I can't help to know that it is goofy. And he gets all the way back home, and they pull up, and they're like, how'd you get here so fast? And he's like, well, I ran. His dad overhears, and he's like, showing off again, huh? And he's like, well, kind of being a bully to me. And he's like, yeah, I understand you want to show off to the bullies, but you're here for a reason, and even if they're being a bully, you got to be better than them, and you got to be a good person. You got a good heart, and all this stuff. And then Clark goes and runs off and hangs out with his dog, and then this is when his dad has a heart attack. Jonathan has a heart attack and dies in front of him, and there's nothing he can do about it. He can't stop the heart attack. Even if he were to run him to a hospital, it wouldn't change it because the time period they're in. So he dies, and he is lingering with this death, feeling unable to help and do anything. He feels like a disappointment, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. And late one night after this, he hears a ominous hum that lures him to the barn, and he finds a green crystal that his actual father, Jor-El, had put into his escape pod when he was leaving Krypton. And this reminds him that he's not from here, and he had always known that growing up, but this reaffirms that he needs to discover who he is. He needs to discover where he came from and all that stuff. And so he decides to leave home. And the next morning, Martha wakes up. She tries to find Clark throughout the house and sees that he's standing out in the field, looking out in the distance, almost reminiscent of Luke when he looks out at the twin suns. He's longing for a better future, a better tomorrow. And she goes out to him, and he tells her, I need to leave. I need to discover who I am. And she said, we always knew that this would happen, and I want to respect you and who you want to become. Just don't forget about us. And, they hug. They have an emotional moment. And he goes off and heads up north, way up north, in fact, I believe to the North Pole. I don't know what else to call that. Maybe Alaska. I don't know. I'm not sure. But he goes up north. So once he gets up there, he holds the crystal in his hand, and then he just throws it as far as he can. And when it lands, it creates the Fortress of Solitude, which is really cool. And he goes inside. He's looking at the vast amount of crystals that have formed around him and in that area. And not only did crystals form, these crystals are a part of Kryptonian technology. It was almost like a little makeshift shelter that his dad, Jor-El, had put in there for him. He goes up and he touches one of the control crystals, which causes a big image of Jor-El to appear before him. And he lets him know that he is from Krypton, and he gives him all this backstory, right? He gets him caught up to speed on who he is, and Superman talks to him, and he's like actually speaking in response, and they're talking back and forth, and his dad is teaching him all the things from a bunch of universes and galaxies, well, not universes, but a bunch of galaxies, because there's 28 known galaxies in this movie, and they decide to talk to get him up to speed on everything, because it's his job to know, just in case there's a threat, he'll be able to take care of it and protect humanity, because that is ultimately what he's there to do. Because of the atmosphere, because of everything being different from Krypton, he is going to be useful as a symbol of hope and be able to bring something great to humanity. And that is what he's there to do. He's there to protect, he's there to serve them as a protector, no matter the threat. And this takes him about 12 years to break down to Superman. And in this time, he decides to create a suit reminiscent of the planet Krypton. And he's got the symbol from his parents, which is, I believe, back on their planet, the symbol of hope, which is why they had his house sigil put on his chest. And he's got a cape, and he flies off to Metropolis, where he'll live his new adult life. This is where the movie really picks up. You know, it shows him getting to Metropolis for the first time. He took a taxi, and he gets a job at the Daily Planet, and he gets acquainted to the people there, his boss, Mr. White, I think, or something like that. And when he's Clark, his alter ego, he raises his voice and pitch a little to make himself sound a little bit more nerdy and a little bit weaker when he's talking. But then when he's Superman, he lowers it and brings out the deeper tone to really get himself attention when he speaks. It's very, very cool, and Christopher Reeves does both portrayals well. And when he switches back and forth, you can really tell that he's pretending to be weaker than he is to be more appealing to the common folk. And he's really finding his groove and fitting in, even though he's having to be clumsy, he's having to be a bit of a dork sometimes. But he does it well, and he blends in so well. And he meets Lois for the first time, and he's very infatuated with Lois right off the bat. He thinks she's beautiful, all that stuff. And he has a fascination with her. He also meets Jimmy Olsen. Over the course of working this, he gets the city beat, which is Lois's beat, but Clark's a faster typer, so he ends up working with Lois, and they become friends, and he ends up talking to Lois and decides to walk her home, trying to get accustomed to the city and stuff, and getting to know Lois more, because he is interested in her. And as they're walking, they get mugged by a guy with a gun, and he takes them to the back alley, and he wants to steal Lois's purse. Now, to play off that he's who he is, he tells Lois that she should probably listen to what he says, because he's going to shoot them. And she acts like she's going to give him her purse before she kicks the gun and causes him to react and shoot, almost shooting her in the back, because she turns to try to run away, but he shoots, and it scares her. It stops her in her tracks. Superman grabs the bullet as the other guy runs away, knowing that he probably just fucked up the rest of his life. Grabs the bullet and falls over like he just fainted. And Lois, being worried, checks on Clark, but he plays it off that he just fainted, and she was like, "Oh, you're real nice for that. What a real help you were." And he's like, "Well, sorry. It was a scary situation." Or something like that. And he's like, "Well, I don't really think he would have gotten much out of." He lists off the bunch of things in her purse, and she's like, "How the hell did you know what was in my purse? You described it to the exact detail." And he's like, "Well, a lucky guess, I guess." And then walks off, and they get a cab. But it was very funny. As they get a cab, we then cut to our first instance of the villain for the movie, or one of the villains for the movie, rather. He's not a main villain, but he's a henchman. This henchman is walking about his business, and the cops are tailing him because they think that he's going to lead them to Lex Luthor, who is very elusive at this point. Not much is known about him, but he is being looked at by the police. In lack of better terms, he's a criminal. So they follow Otis down into the subway, where he then loses one of them, who gets really close to discovering the hideout. And Lex watches Otis go all the way down through the subway, and he's got cameras watching him, and he goes and tells Miss Teskmacher, I don't know how to say her name, Teskmacher? I'm gonna say Teskmacher, that Otis is dumb, like dumb as fuck. And I gotta say here, Lex, he is played very well, and people criticize this version of Lex. I don't. In this movie, I think Lex is played well. I don't remember how he is in the other movies. I know he is goofy as fuck in this, but he still has aura. And I think the reasoning, I'll get to my reasonings about some of the criticisms of the movie later, but I don't think Lex is bad here. And, he's joking around about how smart he is and about all this stuff, and he's talking about how he's, the greatest criminal mastermind, and that he's not going to be able to be stopped. It's very important for his character, by the way. Otis comes in, and Lex is like, oh yeah, by the way, Otis, you were being followed, and thankfully, because I'm so smart, they're not going to find us. And Otis is trying his best to reconcile with Lex, and he's like, it's fine. I don't give that much of a shit, dog. Like, it ain't that deep. But, don't do it again, of course. And he talks about how he is big into real estate, and there's a big plan that he's got cooking up with real estate and the nuclear missiles that he's reading about in the paper, because it's going to help him with his master plan, setting up the big core theme of what Superman has to deal with later on in the movie. And then it cuts back to Clark again, working at the Daily Planet, and he's talking more with Lois, and he asks her on a date, but she turns him down, and she's like, well, I can't tonight because I've got other stuff going on, and I got this big news story that I gotta go to. And he's like, don't you ever take a break, bruh? And she's like, nah, man, news never sleeps, dog. I'm just on that shit. I'm about that life. And he's like, oh, damn, for real, I guess. And then he goes off, and he's being clumsy and goofy as fuck, playing it off really well. And she goes off into her helicopter, about to go head off to the airport. I think she's got a story to do with Air Force One or something like that for the president. And as they're getting ready to take off, the helicopter actually gets caught on one of the wires nearby, and it topples over. It crashes into the part of the building, and it breaks down and falls hanging off the side of the building. And the pilot and co-pilot are down for the count. And Lois is hanging on by a thread, trying to hold on to her life, trying to not fall out of this helicopter. This causes a commotion down on the streets when they look up and they see that the helicopter is hanging over the building. Instead of moving away from it, they're all looking up and staring directly under it, which is, funny as fuck. That's actually realistic. People would actually do that 100%. And, the police are trying to keep them back at bay, but, they're still within falling distance. Clark's making his way out of the building. He's done with work for the rest of the day, and Lois's hat falls down where he's at. It's a pretty tall building, so by the time he actually gets out the door, it falls down next to him, and everybody's screaming and stuff, and he decides to look up, and he sees that there's a helicopter about to fall down. And he's like, oh, fuck. Okay, well, I guess this is a better time than any. Mind you, Superman has not revealed himself until this point, so he then rushes to a place where he can switch into costume. Of course, he's wearing it underneath his normal everyday clothes, and he does the typical rip of the button-up shirt, and he jumps into action and flies off. And a guy actually notices his outfit. He's like, damn, dude, nice outfit. And he's like, excuse me, sir, I got a business to attend to. And just flies off. And the dude's like, damn, all right, cool. He didn't say, those exact words, but I'm paraphrasing, of course, because it was fucking awesome. And the effects of him flying, while goofy at times, I kind of like. I fuck with it. There's something about it that makes it look like he's actually flying. It's really cool, because he's doing like realistic movements. He's not stiff. He's actually fucking fluid with it. He's like fucking like having fun with it, like wiggling around and fucking, it's great. But yeah, he goes up, and Lois falls, and he catches her. And he's like, don't worry, I got you. And she's like, you got me? Who's got you? And then he goes up, the helicopter falls too, and he catches it as well, and he rises up to the top of the building, sets them both down, and he lets the workers know that they need to take care of this woman here and check to see if these guys are okay and get them some help. And then she asks him who he is, and he goes, I'm just a friend. and he flies off. That's reminiscent to the Spider-Man moment where he saves Mary Jane, and it is very, very cool. And he flies off, happy that he saved the love of his life. And he decides, now that he's out and about, let's not stop and do more hero shit. Which I commend, bro. Bro is on business after this point. While he's out and about, a burglar is climbing on the side of a building, and he's using suction cups. It's a very cartoony, comic booky, and he's climbing up the side of the building, and Superman flies up and stands on the building and just stares at him, and he goes, "Going up?" And then the dude freaks out, falls down, letting himself let go of the suction cups, and then he goes and flies down and stops and stands at the bottom, catching him again. And he goes, elevator didn't work? Or something. He said something funny. But when he's Superman, he's got so much aura when he messes with the crooks. It's fucking hilarious. And then he grabs him and drops him down and hands him to a police officer, and he goes, Officer, now they tell me confessions good for the soul. You better listen to this man, because I bet you he's got some things to tell you. And he flies off after showing that he's got a bunch of jewels and shit he's been stealing. And he flies off. Dude, Christopher Reeve has so much aura as Superman. It's uncanny. The fucking humor there, so good. I'm glazing it up a lot, but I like the movie. Okay, what can I say? I like the movie. Flies off, and there's a police chase going on. The crooks are shooting at the cops. They're having a big old shootout. They make it to a boat and get away. Superman flies onto the boat as they're counting their money, and he just stands there fucking looking at them like, what you gonna do, bro? I dare you to do something. And somebody comes up from behind him with a pipe and just fucking tries to whack it on the top of the head. He turns around and looks and goes, bad vibrations? And fucking takes the boat and drops it right in front of the fucking police station. And one of the guys that had just interacted with Superman, the one that I believe dealt with the burglar, was telling the Sarge, like, look, bro, there's this dude flying around in red and blue, like flying around and fucking beating up bad guys. And he's like, bro, listen, you need to go to the bar, you need to get drunk because you're seeing some shit. I'll go there with you. You don't gotta worry. We'll go have some drinks together. And they walk out and they see the boat and the dude flying off. He's like, let's make it right now. Let's not wait, because I think I'm seeing some shit too. And it was pretty funny. But yeah, after this, he's flying around again, and it's really cool to see that he takes time out of his, big superhero moments, and he treats everything the same. He treats everything like something he can help with. He wants to just help people, and he really enjoys helping people. And so he flies out, and he helps this little girl who has got her cat stuck in a tree. And he saves the cat from the tree and pulls out some more aura by helping the little people, which is something that Spider-Man does as well. There's a lot of references, I think, between the two, Spider-Man and Superman, that are just very, very similar. And I couldn't help but think that as I was watching. But, Superman just has the Christopher Reeves has so much aura about him when he's Superman. I just can't help but smile, dude. When he smiles, I smile. That's just it. And so he flies off, and this is one of the big ones here. An airplane loses its engine, and they begin to fall, and the pilots are freaking out. And Superman comes up, and he lifts it up and keeps it stable to finish the rest of the flight. And they're like, what the fuck is happening? We got our engine back. And the dude that looked out and saw Superman wave at him, he's like, listen, you're gonna have to just trust me on this, because there's no way in hell I'm gonna be able to explain this, but don't worry about it and fly and trust me that we're gonna be okay. And he goes back and looks at Superman, and because of this and all these stories coming out about Superman helping people, the news is talking about it like everywhere. It's everywhere. He's blown up that he's helping people. And Lex gets a copy of a report written by Lois Lane, of course, talking about how she was saved by Superman and all this stuff. And he doesn't believe it. And there are some skeptics about Superman as well, saying that he's fake and that it's some big elaborate hoax. And Lex becomes so fascinated with Superman that, as well as continuing his big master plan, he's also going to make it a point to really put Superman to the test and prove that it's a hoax, and prove that Superman is not what he says he is. And that is becoming his main mission and goal throughout the rest of the film, which is very interesting to hear him talking about. And I missed it the first time that I watched it. Cutting back to the Daily Planet, the boss is trying to get ways to get an interview with Superman, and he's telling them that, like, this is going to be the biggest story ever. We need to get our hands on this fast. And as he's talking through the team about this, Lois ends up with a note saying to meet her friend at 8, and she thinks, of course, that it's Superman. I think it's supposed to be a double meaning. That way he could be there as Clark and get in with her as Clark, but as well as Superman, and that he's going to do both, which is very, very cool. But, of course, she's expecting it to be Superman, and she's not really paying attention too much. She just, wants to see Superman again, because she's also interested in Superman. And everybody's interested in Superman because he's just a phenomenon. He's this unexplainable thing that just happened that they don't even want to believe it's real, but it is. And so the night progresses, and she's waiting for him, and he's, of course, being a typical guy, and he's late. But, he's also Superman, so he probably just did some superhero shit and was saving people. He shows up, and, they start flirting with each other. He knows that she's a reporter, and that he wants to answer some questions that people are probably having about him to kind of set things at ease and put some people to rest, that he's not a threat and that he's, a good guy. So she is super fascinated that, he would even take time to talk to her out of everyone else. And she goes and gets her pen and paper and starts asking him questions, specifically romantic questions. She's flirting with him, and he's loving it because he really likes Lois. She asks him how tall he is, how big he is, but then she's like, how much you weigh and shit like that, and he goes and laughs it off, and tells her that he's like 6'4", 225 pounds, and she asks him if his bodily functions work normal, and she's like, do you eat? And he's like, yeah, I eat when I'm hungry. She asks him about his powers, like, you're practically invincible, and he's like, yeah, you can see through anything, and she's like, yeah, he's like, yeah, and she's like, what kind of underwear am I wearing? And he's like, trying to look, and he's like, well, I'm having trouble seeing through this lead planter. And she's like, oh, and he's like, yeah, I really can't see through lead. And she's like, oh, okay, well, that's actually good to know. And so, she's writing everything down. They continue to flirt some more, and then she walks away from the lead planter, and he goes, pink. And she's like, what? He goes, nods at her underwear, and she goes, oh, well, you rascal. They're flirting back and forth. The chemistry with these two are very good. She goes, where are you from? And he tells her about Krypton and about how it's many thousands of miles away from Earth, millions probably. But they're finishing up the interview, and Superman asks if she would like to fly with him, and she's like, wait, right now? And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. And he takes her up and flies her around the city, and flies her all the way to New York, actually, just flying and letting her experience what it's like to fly. And they pass the Statue of Liberty. She's loving every minute of it, and they stretch out as much as they can, and he's holding her up, not really having to show so much strength here because he's super strong, and she's stretching out like she could just let go of him, and she ends up letting go, thinking that she can fly on her own. And then he has to swoop down and save her again. But when he does, he earns more points. And then she's got her own little song, or I think of it more as a poem, but it does sound very song-like, where she's very, very, in her mind, interested in him. And it shows very well that she's interested in him. Yeah, they spend some more time romantically in the air, flying around, setting up that romance. And then he lets her go, and he's like, well, I better be heading out, Lois. And flies off. And she's like, wow, what a Superman. Wait a minute, Superman. And then that's how his name goes to be, which is very clever. And he hears this, of course, because he goes back to the door and knocks on it, pretending to knock on it the entire time as Clark. And he goes, Lois, you didn't forget our date, did you? And she goes, and she like plays it off like the note was for her from Clark. And so, it's very funny. And he is going to tell her that he's Superman, but he chickens out and doesn't end up doing it. And they go on their date, and yeah, the entire time she's still fascinated by having just talked to Superman and spent some time flying around with Superman. She feels very privileged. Then it cuts back to Lex, who is reading the interview, and he is still heavily fascinated on trying to take down Superman, and he points out that he can't see through lead, and he notes that in the interview they talk a little bit more about Krypton, and he's like, Krypton is very fascinating, and he mentions that when he was on Krypton, he was not the same as Earth, so he puts together that there's something about Krypton that weakens him, and this, is leading up to the discovery of kryptonite. And he's like, well, since Krypton exploded and he landed on Earth around this time, we need to look around to other reports during that year and discover if there was any meteorites that fell from Krypton, and he discovered there was down in Africa, and he sets up that he's about to get kryptonite. Very cool, easy to miss if you don't listen to what he's saying and just pay attention to the fact that he's joking around with Otis and Miss Textmacher. Because of the radioactive elements within the meteorite, it can weaken him enough that Lex would be able to kill him, properly being the better man and the smartest man, and that's what he wants. It then cuts to them prepping the missiles to go to specific coordinates, which are now a part of his plan to mess with Superman. So he uses Otis and Miss Textmacher in 2 different scenarios, messing with 2 missiles, and they put coordinates into the missiles so that when they launch the missiles, they're not going to cooperate as planned, and that they will be able to monitor the location specifically through the missile to make it to where that they have complete control of where they land, which is very intricate, very easy to miss again, because they don't really explain it. They kind of just do it, which I don't mind. Yeah, so on the day of launch, Clark's looking around at the Daily Planet, and he notices that Lois isn't around, and he talks to the boss about where Lois is, and he's like, well, she's on a story out in Far West with Jimmy. There's this big unknown guy that bought up a bunch of the land out there, and she's looking into it, and it's very shady. And he's like, oh, well, okay. And during this, he's telling Clark that, he's not a bad guy, but he needs to have a little bit more confidence, and that he's, kind of a pussy. And during this, Lex uses a frequency that only Superman can hear and reaches out to Superman and tells Superman, look, I need to talk to you. And the only way I was going to be able to do that is not by inviting you out to some tea and a dinner, but by telling you that there is going to be a gas bomb released throughout all of Metropolis. He can easily kill at least half of the population of Metropolis, warranting Superman to be in a position that he needs to go speak to Lex. So Clark tries to find a way to follow the frequency, and he exits out of the boss's office as he's continued to talk, uses the fact that nobody really pays attention to him to jump out of the window and flies off, and discovers that he's down in the subway and spins around really fast so that he can turn himself into a personal drill and drills himself down into the subway, because he's super strong and he's fly like that. He then makes his way to the secret entrance, punches the door in, and Lex makes a joke about how he's going to have to talk to his lawyer later about the door. And, the aura that Lex has and how he's not afraid to talk to Superman, very, very classic Lex Luthor. Very cool. And Superman is like, all right, Lex, I'm here. Where's the gas bomb? And he's like, oh, you like that idea? Yeah, well, unfortunately for you, it's a little idea I'm toying with in the back of my mind, and it's not really here. I just wanted to talk to you. And he's like, what kind of sick person does this, threatening the lives of millions? And he's like, well, a sick person that doesn't actually threaten to end the lives of millions, but by actually ending the lives of millions, because that is what he wants to do. And he explains he wants to be really invested in real estate, and what he means is he asks Superman about the San Andreas Fault in California, and Superman's like, yeah, I know, it's the place where 2 plates meet, and it's where a lot of earthquakes cause. He's like, exactly. So what happens if you take a nuclear missile and you put it at the exact weakest point in the San Andreas Fault? What would happen is if you get a powerful enough bomb, California across that fault line will fall into the ocean, leaving him to have all of the real estate on the opposite side of that fault line, becoming way more profitable for refugees and way more profitable for future development of cities that could go along that line, because he owns it and he can properly dictate what goes where, and making the property that he owns more valuable than just some random crappy desert, which is very interesting and a unique way to go about a villain plan. Very intricate, even for its time. And Superman calls him a madman, and that he's really not going to be able to fool Superman by thinking he wouldn't be able to stop at 1 missile. And he's like, you're right. That's why there's not just 1 missile. There's 2. And no matter how fast you are, you're not going to be able to catch up to both, because they're going in completely opposite directions. He's like, the only way you're going to be able to stop both of them is with my detonator. And Superman's like, all right, where the fuck is the detonator? And Lex is like, you should already know where the detonator is. You can see through walls, can't you? And playing with him even more. And Superman looks through and tries to find it. Lex is sitting on a lead chest, and he's like, Lex, you madman, you really think I'm not going to be able to see through lead? I'm going to turn this lead into your prison bars. And then opens it up, and it's kryptonite, and Superman fell right into his trap. He's like, ha, get fucked, Superman. You thought you could outsmart me. You can't outsmart me. I'm Lex Luthor, bitch. And then Superman gets weakened. He puts the necklace of kryptonite, took some lead and stuff and put it on him. And Superman gets weighted down. And he pushes Superman into the pool because with the kryptonite on him, he's going to be weakened enough that he can drown like a normal person because he can't fly out and he's going to be like a normal person. And he lets Superman know that the other missile is going to be going to New Jersey, and a specific town in New Jersey. And Miss Teschmacher's like, wait a minute, my mom's in that town. And he looks at the watch in that back of her and shakes his head no. And fucking walks off. Dude, I swear he purposely did that shit just so he doesn't have, because they're dating and he doesn't want to mess with the in-laws. That is some fucking funny shit. Dude, the aura Lex has is fucking peak. I like this version of Lex very much. But ultimately, Miss Teschmacher, not wanting her mom to die, is willing to help Superman as long as he saves her mother. So, being a man of his word, he says yes. She takes the necklace off of him, and she kisses him first, though. He flies up out of there and goes to save Miss Teschmacher's mom first, and stops the missile from hitting New Jersey. Unfortunately, in the time that it took him to do that, the damage was done. Lex essentially won by having the nuke go off on the San Andreas fault line. And as Superman takes the first missile and shoots it off into space, he looks down, sees that it hits California, and rushes to it because Lois and Jimmy are in California, close to that San Andreas fault line. Very interesting stuff. The ground begins to crumble, and the Golden Gate Bridge starts to crack and fall, and the cars are flying off, and all this stuff. There's a train that's going by, and rubble starts to go crashing down the train. A bunch of shit is going wrong. Lois is driving around, coming back from her reporter interview, and notices that there's a big, massive earthquake as she's getting gas, and the gas station is affected by the rocks crumbling down the mountains, and she drives away as fast as she can because as soon as she left, the rocks crumble into the gas tanks and blow up the gas station that she was just at, and the cracks forming along the road, and she has to swerve around, and the light poles are falling down on top of her. Jimmy is on the dam in this area, and the dam begins to crack, and all of this stuff, and Superman has to save it all. So he goes into the impact hole that the nuke made and goes underneath into the Earth's core and starts putting pieces of the rocks as best as he can back up into the San Andreas fault line. Starts stopping the big earthquake from happening. Well, all the damage is still done though, so he has to go and solve those problems. So he first, after dealing with the big earthquake and pushing the rocks back up in the Earth's core, which is a very cool shot, by the way, gets back out, he flies up to the Golden Gate Bridge and stops a bus full of kids from falling off, and then continues off towards the train. The train is going along, trying to get to its destination, but the crack that's forming from the San Andreas fault line causes the train tracks to rupture and spread apart, and the train will go right into the crack and blow the train up. So Superman flies up and he puts himself in the middle of the train tracks, allowing the train to pass over him as if he were the train track himself, and keeps the train from falling down, allowing it to continue on its route to safety, saving everyone in the train. Then, as he's doing that, the dam starts to crack and explode. All the water flows through, causing a new problem that the town below is going to get affected by this flood. On top of that, Jimmy's on top of the dam, about to fall because the entire thing is crumbling down, as well as the power generators nearby exploding due to the massive surge and spike that this is causing. So Superman has to go down and stop the explosions happening at the generator power station. Shuts the power off, allowing the workers nearby to escape, because they were trapped by the live wires and the explosion and the damage, and he stops that from being able to happen. Enough time for him to fly up and go and save Jimmy from falling to his death, and of course he drops off to a safe distance, and then has to go stop the flood before it hits his town, and he pushes these big rocks from the mountain to stop and make a natural dam of rocks to block this water from destroying this little town. And he's doing all of this stuff, and at the same time he's doing this, Lois has made it to a distance that she thinks she's going to be okay, and she stops because she's out of gas and her car won't start. And rocks start cascading from the mountain next to her. She didn't get far away enough, and the earth begins to crack open, and her car falls into this crack as rocks pour on top. And then when everything starts shifting back, the car crushes, pressing her and suffocating her to death. And he stops the water from destroying this town. And during this time, Lois was calling for help. It's at this point he stops hearing Lois, and his heart sinks, and he goes, oh shit. He immediately flies off, sees her car barely sticking out of the ground, and flies to it, picks it up, furiously getting the rubble off of it because he doesn't want this to be true. But it is. Rips the door off the car, pulls her out of the car. She's gone. Which, when I first saw this after rewatching, I was like, holy shit, I forgot this happened. Where he loses Lois. And oh boy howdy, this fucks with Superman. The guy who's always smiling, always happy, is showing he has love for this woman. And she's gone. He feels the same feeling he felt when his adopted dad died right in front of him and he couldn't save him. And he couldn't save her now. She was what kept him going. She was what made him be able to smile after saving other people, because he could always come back to Lois, because Lois was a good thing in his life, and it's now gone. And he can't go on without Lois because he loves her that much. And because he would rather not deal with the heartbreak and the loss, he's not strong enough to deal with the loss of losing Lois. He flies up, furiously angry with himself for not being fast enough, hearing in his head over and over that his dad telling him, you cannot interfere with human history. You cannot interfere with history. Do not interfere. He decides to break that rule and interferes and flies around the opposite direction of the earth, reversing time itself, and rewinds it enough, furiously crying to where Lois is alive, and spins the earth back to where it's on its normal rotation and flies down as fast as he can to Lois and save her before everything stops. And he does. He comes up to her, smiling again that she's alive. And, she's kind of upset with him that he didn't get there faster, but, he's smiling because she's alive and he saved her. And it's very, very wholesome. And though it's not lasting long, because Jimmy walks up and is furious with Superman as well. And he's like, well, at least they're both okay. And before they were able to kiss and actually have a moment, it gets ruined by Jimmy. God damn it, Jimmy. But Superman flies off, happy, and on his way to go put Lex in prison for what he's done. And he goes and he puts Lex off in a prison. Lex reveals that he's bald and has been wearing a wig the whole time. Also very cool. And he then flies off, tells the warden that it's not him that saved him. They work for the same team. No need to thank him. He's just doing his job. And flies off into space, giving us one last scene of aura as he flies off towards the sun and smiles directly at the camera as he passed by. Dude, fucking peak. End the movie, credits roll, and I noticed something at the end of the theatrical version where it teases next year that Superman 2 will come, which, knowing Marvel, how they do that at the end of the movies, that was the first movie to fucking do it in a comic book movie. On God, it was. Peak. Absolute fucking peak. Now, review of the movie. It's safe to say I like the movie. And I know that it's, for some people it's harder to watch nowadays because it's not as polished, I gotta say the HBO Max version, though, they had to have remastered it or something because it's got a lot more quality to it. It's in higher resolution. It's not as fuzzy, which is really good, and it really helps it. And the theatrical cut is very good because it cuts out a lot of the long, dragged out moments and stuff. But I've seen a lot of criticisms on this movie about it being too slow in the beginning. And I say yes to that depending on the version you watch. If you watch the extended version, you're watching it because you enjoy it and you want to see the extra scenes and all that stuff, the extra context. But the theatrical version, I think, is fine. However, with the theatrical version, you're going to get a lot more choppiness when it comes to cuts because they do cut out a lot of that stuff. And some of that stuff isn't as clean. But I think that's, you either get too long of a movie or you get one that's not perfectly polished. But the heart and the charm of the movie is there. And I've seen a lot of people take a dislike to Lex's character. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that Lex is done perfectly in this movie because this is a version of Lex that is in his criminal prime, because he's hiding from the cops already. So he's down underground because he's hiding. You know, he's done a bunch of crimes already. It's been alluded to that, but he's ramping up more and more and becoming a bigger threat. The cops are already searching for him, but he's so jokey and he's got a lot of jokes. People talk about how he's like too humorous and he's like less maniacal. That's when you miss the fact of what he actually says and take everything that he says as a joke when it's not. He's like a double-edged sword. He's joking, but at the same time he means what he's joking about. Like, he's joking that he's like the best mind and he thinks that he's going to get away with everything, which is why he's being so cocky, until Superman puts a stop to that and he starts being like, this is some bullshit, bruh. Because he thinks he's going to be able to outsmart Superman. He thinks he's going to be able to get away with his master plan. It almost works, mind you, if Superman didn't, take the ability to spin around and reverse time, which is another point that I'm about to bring up. But I think to this version of Lex, I think it's absolutely fine to have that, especially with the rest of the tone of the movie. It's so different compared to Superman that it's almost like night and day difference, because Superman holds himself to a more respectful approach. Lex is obnoxious. He is a piece of shit dickhead, and he plays it well. Now, it's not fully maniacal villain Lex that we know in the comics, but they're setting up that for the next movie, because this is supposed to be a 1 and 2 movie. Of course, there's 3 and 4, but at the time, it was supposed to be Superman 1, Superman 2, and Lex plays a big part in both of those. So there was obviously going to be more with Lex, because we didn't even get Bald Lex. We got before Bald Lex, and with that in mind, what it is an actually good story. Start to finish, the story is great. It's a little bit slow, I agree, in the beginning, but you need that for people who don't know Superman, who don't know the lore. It's needed to get a basic understanding of who he is, where he comes from, and why he's important when he gets to Earth, and having him grow up. And they cut a lot of that out in the theatrical version. So I say if you watch the theatrical version on HBO Max, you're going to be fine. It's a very good watch. And the point with the reversing the time around and him flying around the Earth, of course it's not scientifically accurate, but it's not scientifically accurate of there being a planet called Krypton, and the fact that people from that planet are able to be stronger and able to float off the ground on our gravity is not scientifically accurate either. So it's like you can't pick and choose shit. Also, with the fact of it being a comic book movie about a guy who can fly and shoot lasers from his eyes, it's not scientifically accurate either. So that argument doesn't make sense. But I want to point out that the Flash also does shit like this. I mean, there's a whole fucking story where Flashpoint Paradox or Flashpoint exists, where he fucking runs so fast that he causes a rift in time, which isn't accurate either. But when Superman does it, for a very similar reason, the only reason Flash does that is because he wants to save his mom. Superman does it because he wants to save Lois, okay? Like, we can't pick and choose there, because it's either they all can do it if they have the ability to do it, or none of them can. So I don't know the best way to approach that other than, like, it's not that deep. It's a goofy comic book movie that ends up selling itself well, and the story fits it, and the emotional side of Superman shows through that moment, because he would rather save Lois than live without her. And that is the most human he feels throughout the entire movie. Throughout the entire movie is when he loses Lois. And it's not a story that is very new to Superman. They've made comics about him losing Lois. I mean, Injustice is one of the biggest stories where Joker kills Lois, and instead of continuing to be the happy Boy Scout that we know him to be, he kills all the villains and goes on a warpath and becomes a tyrant, killing all the villains. Like, that's literally what he does. And I don't think that if he were to have let her die and not went back to save her by spinning around the globe, reversing time, I don't think he would have stayed a Superman. I genuinely don't think it, because he was that invested in her, and that motivation of keeping her as a possible love interest. Not even just possible, he does love her. You see that through the movie. You just don't get time to let it flourish because he's off doing other shit. He's getting busy and sidetracked. Also due to the fact that there's supposed to be a sequel in mind when making this movie. It's not just a one-parter. They're saving it. I think that it's valid to say that he wouldn't have stayed Superman. It doesn't feel to me that he would have continued as Superman. He would have gave up the cape wholeheartedly. But that's just me. These are my opinions after watching the movie. I've watched this movie damn near 3 times in a row because it's that enjoyable. It's that fun. It's also just a fun movie. Like, if you let yourself go and enjoy this goofy comic book movie, it is very good. And that's what I'm hoping that the new James Gunn Superman movie is. I'm hoping that it's fun, that it's, gonna be a good time, and have the same heart and the same feelings that this movie gives me when rewatching it. And if I had to rate this movie, I would give this movie a solid, I would say this movie is a solid 8.8 out of 10. Very solid. Actually, no, I would say this is a solid 9 out of 10. Solid 9 out of 10. It does what it sets out to do well. Even though it's dated for its time, it was a decent movie. Sure, it can be campy, it can be a little bit goofy, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know what you're getting. It's a comic book movie, and they really make it feel like a comic book movie because it is very true to the OG comics of Superman. And I think that's what it needed to be. And Christopher Reeve's performance as Superman, still to this day, one of the best performances of Superman, because he's true to the character, and he can play both him and Clark well. The relationship dynamics between him and Lois were not fully fleshed out. However, there was supposed to be a sequel in mind while this movie was out, so it was never going to be fully there. But with that in mind, what is there isn't bad. It sets up the foundation for the next movie to capitalize on their relationship, making both 1 and 2 as a whole better fleshed out films and better fleshed out stories, which I'm excited to watch the sequel. I will be doing that, but I'm probably going to do Man of Steel next because I want to get both videos out before I do my review on the new Superman. So Thursday will be this video, then Friday will be Man of Steel, and then I will go watch I will go watch the new Superman movie Friday night, and then Saturday will be the review of the new Superman. Don't worry, spoilers won't be in the first half, it'll be in the last half, and very looking forward to going to see this movie. It's going to be a fun time, and hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. It is a longer video, but there was way more to talk about, and I don't think you guys mind it. A lot of my longer videos ended up doing well anyways, so that being said, I'm going to get on out of here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces, everybody. Bye-bye.